Hello and welcome back to the How to Get Analytics Job podcast. In this episode, we have two students from our Marketing Analytics case study course who are going to have their Tableau Public profiles reviewed. So in that course, they got lectures on how marketing functions in a business, what marketing data sources are typically available, and they also got step-by-step instructions on how they can build out a Tableau marketing analytics dashboard. So this dashboard can be used by a marketing manager to make better marketing decisions. Let me make the implicit explicit. This whole episode is about personal branding. We've been in the analytics education space for years now, and something we see over and over again is that people fixate on hard skills. What's typically going to get you a job is your ability to solve real-world business problems. What both of the students do within this lecture is that they're going to show how they approach marketing problems. And they also have a portfolio, which is something tangible that they can point to in an interview process. They've also posted this on LinkedIn and they're coming on the podcast. So if you can do good work in a public way, this is a great way to catch the attention of your potential future hiring manager. Also, if you want to get back to the podcast, the best thing that you can do is leave a like, a comment in the comment section down below, and subscribe and ring the bell. This is going to help boost our signal out on the YouTube algorithm. So I just wanted to reemphasize, the personal branding piece may be the piece that's missing in helping you land your analytics dream job. Hello and welcome everyone. So we have a packed house and I thought it would be kind of cinematic to introduce each person one by one. So our first guest, I would say our guest of honor here, is Michael Galarnyk. Michael, how are you doing today?
Good. Happy to be on.
I know. Oh, I was about to say, I think you were the first. Is this the third or the fourth time you've been on?
Maybe third or fourth. I can't remember. Maybe fourth, I think, by now.
But I mean, every time you come on, it's a hit. So I mean,
well, hopefully.
Well, look, this is different because now we have, this is the most I've ever had on live stream, and it is it's a little overwhelming. So okay, I've introduced you, Michael. Now let's bring on the team. So I'll bring on Hunter and Albert. So how are you guys doing today?
Pretty good. Running the new computer today, so.
That's true. Did you get a new haircut? It's a new part. I haven't seen that yet.
I just didn't put gel in it today because I literally right before the live stream just finished setting up my computer, and I was on a rush to get on, and so I just had to kind of throw this together. Does it look? How do I look? Pretty good.
It looks fantastic.
You're bringing that student energy that we so desperately need on the podcast. We appreciate it.
Someone's got to bring the youth. I mean,
yeah, we got to stay relevant. I don't want to be too bad of a boomer.
This is like I was up until 4 a.m. cramming for my midterm look.
I was going to say the semester starts next week and you're already in that.
Yeah, true.
That's awesome.
Summer.
All right, cool. Now let's bring on our young Padawans, our learners. So we got Tim and we got Danny. So you guys are going to be in the hot seat today. I hope you're ready.
Whoa now. Who is Hunter calling not a youth?
Tim, you're my age.
Whoa now. Yeah, that's true.
Danny, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How's everyone doing?
Good. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet everyone. I'm excited. I'm kind of nervous too, but
okay, this is all for growth. None of this is personal. But you guys are going to be, I mean, you guys are going to have a killer personal brand after this. I mean, you already do. Like, Danny, I saw your LinkedIn post. I mean, you have more polish on your dashboards than typically what I put on. So, I mean, already the bar is pretty high. So this is a safe space. You're not, no attacking here. But what I wanted to jump into right fast is that, okay, so right now this is the marketing analytics course, and this is kind of step-by-step, super in-depth. What we're starting to do, which is being spearheaded by Hunter here, is we're starting to partner with nonprofits. And Tim, you are a part of, well, actually, you're heading up Code for Greensboro, right?
Yeah. So I'm one of the organizers of Code for Greensboro, and we're the local affiliate of Code for America, which people may have heard of for some of the really big, interesting projects, helping people get their records cleared across the country. Basically, the mission of our group is called Civic Tech. using technology and data to help support better community service outcomes, public service outcomes. So from building an app for people to look up their voter place and the user experience of the voting booth, which was Go Vote GSO that we rolled out last year, to what I'm really excited about working together with you on, John David, and Hunter and I have been talking, is pulling data that the city makes available and helping the community be able to access things like 911 call data, fire incident data, and make some meaning out of that to make their communities a better place.
Awesome. So I actually had a call with Nicholas, who Albert just put me in contact with. So what I'm thinking the next 6 months to a year, we're going to continue as the podcast is running as now, but we're going to be partnering with local nonprofits to do these challenges where, so the Cape Fear Collective does a lot of, so it's partnered with, I think, UNCW, and they do a lot of like marine analysis. So we could have a huge data set, have him kind of spearhead and lead this group of doing the analysis. Whoever has the most polished dashboard gets that project put on their website. And that's a great piece of personal branding that you could have within your LinkedIn page. So I'm really excited about that. And Hunter, the Discord server, we're doing these weekly challenges, and it's not as like the marketing analytics course. It keeps growing and growing. I think it's at 3 hours right now, but we're adding a whole nother chapter to it. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Discord server and the weekly challenges we're doing?
Yeah, so it was a little bit unfortunate because like I had left for like a little while to go on vacation with my family, and so we'd only managed to get through one official weekly challenge. So I actually spoke with Tim a little bit more about that this past Wednesday, I think it was. And so we're going to make that a little bit more integrated, and we're going to stretch it out over a longer length of time, thinking maybe bi-weekly, so that we can have videos for each part of the process. So, we're going to talk about, like, for example, me and Tim went through the data already for this fire, the fire incident data, I believe it's called. And we kind of covered what the next steps were going to be. And so we want to make a video about cleaning that data up, what that would look like, and really each step of the process, making a video for each one so that it's kind of seamless. It's kind of like a mini lecture that's just less structured, if you know what I mean.
Perfect. So, Michael, I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you think about this approach?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. So, anytime you do any sort of like playing with data, trying to clean it, theoretically trying to clean it, then realizing you're not cleaning it enough, and then coming back and trying to visualize it, it's really powerful. Additionally, if you're going to put something out there, the more the merrier typically. So.
Right. Well, because what I'm seeing from my perspective is that there are a lot of nonprofits who need help, and there are a lot of people in our podcast who want messy, dirty data. And why don't we just bring these two together, and it's mutually beneficial?
Yeah, it's really a perfect combination. People get experience as well to put in their resume or link to, but they also get experience that are very useful for like interviews, for example. Someone's like, oh, have you ever, cleaned messy data? Like, what are the challenges here? You actually talk from experience and be like, oh, it's this data set, this wildfire data set. So it supposedly had this information, but actually like some of this information was, invalid or whatever,
Yeah. What's funny is, so I think you actually had the most popular episode of season 2 of the podcast with the analytics portfolio. People just love that. And I think part of that's, it's a newer concept. Like not very many people are putting out content on that, but the second most popular episode was the Jay Sueno episode. And so he got his first job at Amazon. And part of what helped him get that first job was that he started his own nonprofit called Mama P. And it was about, they sold toothbrushes, but it had a very sustainable ecological angle to it. And so basically starting your own nonprofit or 501(c) is like your portfolio on steroids, because he had to collect the data, he had to make the sales, he had to like set everything up. And he said that helped him in the interview process, because they asked like, hey, what do you care about? And he's like, well, let me tell you about this nonprofit I started. And then, it's just such an amazing conduit to have a conversation about who you are as a professional while kind of subversively showing your skill set.
Oh yeah, I mean, Jay is also an amazing communicator.
Yeah.
So that really helps the interview process as well. But he communicates like what he's done, like what his projects are, and like, hey, I've actually built something. Like you can go look at it. It's not like fake. Like I'm not lying to you.
Right.
So he's very amazing.
True. All right. So we're 10 minutes in. Tim, we're putting you in the hot seat. So do you go ahead and share your screen? Do you have your Tableau Public pulled up?
Yeah. Give me 1 second here. Let me make sure it's on the right screen so that I'm also looking at you all on the video. And I got my special mug today for the hot seat. You see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That cut. So he's at HQ Greensboro right now. I'm at home now. Like this summer, I migrated to my house. That mug has been at HQ Greensboro for like 5 or 6 years. It's been there forever.
Yep. And every time I grab it, I think about great data. So speaking of great data, I was excited to work with this.
Wait, hold on.
Analytics case study.
Let me pause you here. So the way I think we need to give this kind of structure before I got ahead of myself. I got excited, pulled you in. So what we're going to do, it's going to be 2 parts. So we're going to have kind of like, it's like a mock interview where let's say that me and Michael are on a hiring panel and you were presenting this to us as a project, like answering the question of, tell us about a project you worked on in the past. And if it's a Zoom interview, you could literally say, hey, I've got my Tableau Public portfolio page. Let me just share the screen with you. So I think that is super actionable, concrete advice on, Zoom interviews. But so what we're going to do is 2 reviews, essentially. We're going to critique like your presentation style and just give you feedback on like how to better improve that. And then we're going to get into the nitty gritty of, okay, are these KPI cards right? How could you add in more user interface to the dashboard and kind of give a more visualization focused critique?
Got it. So would you like me to back up?
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I will take on, it's funny because we just improvised this entire time. Like I'm totally making this up on the spot, but I am the interview lead and Michael is kind of like the technical lead. So let's say I'm the analytics manager and then Michael's the data scientist on the team and he's kind of the one who has more of the technical skills. So the interview might go something like, all right, Tim, how about you tell me about a project? Well, okay, I see that you pulled up this Tableau project. Can you tell me like what's going on with this?
Yeah, thanks for the question, John David, and the opportunity to tell you a little bit about my background here as we do this interview. This was a local entrepreneurial company who helps community members to sell their personal crafts and things that they, may make in a home shop, but they don't want an Etsy, right? Okay, so this local entrepreneur has channeled that into a pretty effective business, and they asked for some analytics on how their marketing investment is performing. And so they primarily focus on Amazon and Facebook. And as you can see on this dashboard, what we wanted to do is come back to them with the key metrics that they were interested in and the ability to keep an eye on them over time. And so we're presenting this to them at the end of Q1, so January, February, March. And we have here the return on investment numbers, very clear so that you can see them immediately when you pull up. And the biggest part of the dashboard is, of course, what the company is most interested in, which is the total sales and the total ad spending. And then we get the chance to break down a little bit with them. How is each channel performing? And as they're interested, we can also filter out some of the points that maybe we want to zoom in on. And as our data source evolves, and as time goes on for this client, they could use this dashboard to watch the progression of their marketing investment over time. And so the ROI numbers, they might see change, and the total sales and total ad spending, they would see change based on their performance.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more. What's your thinking behind this filter? What's the functionality? Like, what's the value add for that?
Well, so the value add for this, I'm coming to this from a place where my background is in program evaluation, organizational data collection, and org development metrics, right? So we're often interested in evaluating the effect of a particular intervention. And so my idea with this filter was that we might want to zoom in on a particular week or a period of weeks where some action was taken by the company that changed things, right? So week of February 2, total ad spending went way up. And then that seemed to be a leading indicator for the week of February 23rd. And that happened again the first couple weeks in March. Now, if we were going a little further with this, might be able to pick that particular month of February and start to drill in on the metrics there. And what I had hoped to do, a couple of things. You and I, John David, had talked about breaking this down by channel. There's also
You're breaking the fourth wall here, Tim. I'm the interviewer. So for those of you who are watching, I did take a meeting with Tim and Danny just to kind of help them a little bit. So there's a little bit of coaching involved, but we need to get back into scene here.
That's right.
So Tim, I feel like you're mistaken. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I apologize. This is awkward now. Sip my water.
Michael, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so a couple things. So it's an Etsy business, but what kind of Etsy business? Are they, embroidering things? Are they, what are they selling exactly, like roughly? Because this might have an effect on sales might be dependent on certain times of the year, or there might be some sort of seasonality here that we're not seeing as well, because it's just like one quarter. But that's a really mean question in a lot of ways, I would say, simply because, you have one quarter of data, and like seasonality is typically much more prevalent in like larger amounts of sales and like bigger companies and stuff.
No,
have you considered that?
I like the mean energy. Tim,
yeah.
Answer.
Oh my. Yeah, Michael, thank you for the question. What we have in our data set is actually units. And so we don't break them down by whether the particular community member who's contributing products is doing embroidery or woodworking. Like I said, these are people from all across Greensboro. And this entrepreneur has created, if you will, a storefront for them to feature local products. And so some of that gets lost in the aggregation of the data before it came to us. And that might be something that we dig into more with the client, is where could we break down that supply chain and look at the performance of particular categories of inventory rather than just total sales by channel. Okay. It's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. So sorry, I have another question. So
please,
you have like clearly different ROIs for Amazon and Facebook. So have you like dug into the reasoning behind that, or is it just a typical ROI for Amazon versus Facebook? Or do you think there's no point to doing Amazon just loading up on Facebook? Or do you think there'll be like diminishing returns if you just kept on pumping money into like Facebook ads?
That's a really good question. And I have not broken it down quite so much with them. It seems like the performance of Amazon sales, if we were to dig more into that channel individually, which we can over here. Oh, sorry. Now I'm lost in my Tableau.
You're going off script here. So
yes, we could dig into that with the client, but the data set's not quite structured right.
Oh, cool. Okay. So, I mean, that's a big part of like life. And if you come, work for this theoretical company that we're interviewing you for, is that sometimes your data just isn't what you think it is. So sometimes for like dashboards occasionally, but I see it for like more like super data sciencey things where people like have a little like, extra sheet or whatever saying like, oh yeah, here's the data, like here's what was good with it, here was like the weird stuff. And having that easily available is also great too, because you might forget over, if you have this dashboard, you like, you sell it, you interview, you get a job, whatever, and then like 2 years later, you're like, I don't remember anything about this data, when you're answering questions. But that's really just a very nitpick, really. It's not a like a negative thing for actually getting the job itself. It's just something to consider, at least for your own benefit too.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I'm writing that down because that's a really useful thing, especially when we talk about translating between our insights as analysts and the clients who are interested in hearing them but don't speak the language of data. If we have a cheat sheet in the background of here are the things that were challenging with the data set and the particularities that I saw as a data analyst, data scientist, and presenting those things as context in easily accessible language when we explain our metrics, when we explain these dashboards.
Okay, so we've been neglecting the chat for 21 minutes. We need to make an end to that right now. So, so we have one random person here. Basic feedback from one random person's view. No need to thank the interview for each question. It becomes a bit patronizing after the first time. Matt is being self-deprecating. He's an active hiring manager. So I think this is just an interesting conversation to be had. Michael, what do you think? Do you agree? What do you feel about this one random person's opinion?
I mean, so I think in general, there are so many things we could possibly be doing just on a daily basis to, improve our interview score, essentially. I think that's definitely something to consider, something to do. But is that the most important thing? Just consider that before, you just focus all your time on just, adjusting how you speak, which is very important for consulting, of course. But yeah, of course, no need to thank the interview for each question. But I think it's low on the list of priorities to fix.
Right.
That's my opinion. I'm like, it's a judgment call, really. But I think Matt has a great point. So.
Well, I mean, it's just an opinion. I just thought it was interesting pulling in that to kind of because it's funny because Matt was in the chat. He didn't even realize it was because what we did last semester, Michael, if you remember, this was all pre-recorded. So like we're able to interact with the audience while he's giving this. I mean, it's almost like trying to spin multiple plates while riding a unicycle right now. Like there's so much going on, but I think that's an interesting point. I don't think it's overly patronizing. It's funny though, because Tim, you crack me up because you have a presentation voice and you code switch real hard. It's hilarious. It's like you go into like it's almost like your David Attenborough presentation voice that you go into.
And then I went off script and I'm like, oh well, thanks for the feedback, John David. That's great. Just smash that fourth wall, yeah.
Well, it's also funny that you the context in which you put this case study, you completely ad-libbed. Like this isn't that wasn't part of the actual course, which no, I really like that you kind of got creative with it. But I mean, it gave it really good context. So what I liked about your presentation is that you started high level and you laid out the problem. I think so many people that I see in the interviews, like kind of setting is they jump right into the hyper specific details and then they go super granular and then try to back out to the 5,000 foot view. So you did a fantastic job of just setting the scene. And one note of critique from my perspective is you may want to have given it a little bit more space and like say, oh yeah, so we did this marketing analysis for this company similar to Etsy, but for local businesses. And then maybe have the interviewer ask a question because it was like a very long, and I don't know if that's just like a kind of your approach style, but I think it's good to be a little bit more conversational. But like Michael was saying, that's kind of low on the totem pole. Overall, I would say that was a fantastic presentation. You have any more feedback, Michael?
Oh yeah, sorry, tons of feedback. So
I love it.
So like anything, right? I work in distributed computing these days, which is not important what the topic is, but essentially like scaling up algorithms and stuff. So my sort of question here is, this is in sales, and of course it's, different field, but how scalable is, like, when you increase the ad spend, increasing on total sales? Because it clearly looks like if you spend more money in ads, that money spent is actually clearly worth it just from the chart itself. So do you think there'd be like a point where it's like, oh, it's not worth it at all to keep on increasing ad spend if sales don't go up, in the same sort of fashion as now?
Michael, your answer from about 5 minutes ago about this being only one quarter, I think applies here. If we had a year's worth of data, it would be much easier to do some predictive analytics and look at the trends over time. But here we don't know if what we're seeing is a seasonal slump in January and February, perhaps, right? That starts to pick up at the end of February. We would really want to look at a longer period of sales data in order to make some predictions about trends in the ad spending. If I were giving this company a recommendation right now, I would say stay the course with Facebook and scale back a little bit on Amazon, or even pump more money into Facebook because it's clearly working. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. So then as an evaluator, one might, or in any consultant's role, one might want to dig into the specific particularities of Facebook. Is that because there's more of a community on Facebook, right? Allowing these local entrepreneurs to spread the word amongst their friends, versus Amazon isn't as accessible to the particular community. Perhaps maybe what we're seeing has nothing to do with the ad spend itself, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, that's a great point, because oftentimes you see one thing, you assume, correlation is causation. So it could be something else entirely. So that's a fantastic point. And for stakeholders and for, my boss, essentially, that's probably the most important thing to mention, because otherwise we'll just keep on pumping money into ads and then wonder why, 6 months from now, why sales haven't gone up. So it's this is a really great dashboard. And of course, it's based on your data itself. So the other thing that I find kind of interesting is you increase ads, you get total sales. But at some point also, is there a limit to how much sales you could have because you have a limited inventory? So I think that's really cool and something to consider just for down the road, because you may not even have that in your data set, right? And final just comment, because I know we have limited time here, is you have Amazon ROI, you have Facebook ROI. I was wondering if you, try Google Ads. I know you probably didn't because it's just the data set you were given. But do you think Google Ads would be worth trying or similar?
Yeah, absolutely. You might take 50% of the Amazon spend and put it into Google Ads next quarter, and we'll create another KPI card for it.
All right, so I'm going to break the fourth wall again here, Michael. So this case study course is based off of, I ran the capstone course last semester. This is data that's been part of the reason why it's not non-specific is that I've removed all of the private information. And so what my students did last semester is that they did an ROI calculation for Facebook, Amazon, and Google. I wanted to remove one of them just to make sure that I'm absolutely protecting my clients, make sure it's above board. But I think that you kind of hit on something of well, maybe we need to expand. Okay, maybe what we could do is take half of the ad spend budget for Amazon and divert it to Google Ads. And then kind of what I try to explain in the case study is that this is a sprint and this is the first iteration. And I think I may go in and kind of treat this course as a living document, go in 6 months and then add, a full year's worth of data, and then have them kind of start here, make some assumptions, and then see, did those assumptions check out for the real world?
Oh, this is wonderful. Yeah, I was just making a comment about diverting investment or diverting funds and stuff.
Awesome. So Evan is it Levy or Levy? So I haven't talked to him. We grabbed a coffee like 2 or 3 years ago. And he is a marketing analytics expert that lives in Durham. So he was piggybacking off of, I guess we were talking about seasonality.
Mm-hmm.
So Evan was saying seasonality and more data can help answer that question, but you definitely need more specific metrics and ad platforms relating to available reach and available impressions to talk about diminishing returns. So I absolutely, I agree. What was interesting is that the context of this case study is that this company was doing about 200 million in sales through like a distribution network, that they spun out their own direct-to-consumer line. And this is their first stab at going direct-to-consumer.
Oh.
So my students, with the limited data, and the data wasn't much more granular than this, gave enough of a signal for the president of the company to say, all right, we're going to go with this in this direction. So I like that this case study is pitted in reality, and it's like there are constraints, and you don't have a perfect, clean data set that is, a crystal ball that lets you predict everything perfectly.
It's very much real world where
Right.
you just want data and it just, we don't have that information. We have to go off what we have, So I think this is fantastic.
Perfect. Well, what's funny is that I was planning to do like the let's critique his presentation, but it kind of melded into the presentation, and then Michael, you were like critiquing the KPIs and stuff. So I think
the visuals are fantastic. So they give you like a jumping off point for like actually talking to each other and like finding out about this data.
Right. But I guess kind of the meta point is that if you build out a Tableau Public portfolio and you have a Zoom interview, you may be able to pull that in on screen and talk about your work. Because think about how this was the conduit for this conversation about seasonality, about limitations of data sources, about different ways of visualizing the data, about kind of who was the target demographic or the buyer persona. I think that this is just a great conversational tool that gives you so much ammunition to kind of guide the conversation in interesting ways. But very concretely, you're showing that this is the analysis that I've done, and here are the conclusions. It actually doesn't matter what conclusions you come to. It's all about that thought process and how you are solving novel problems that you've never seen before.
Yeah, in my experience, that's what a lot of employers, a lot of clients are looking for. There's one other thing I want to call out before if you're about to shift to Danny's dashboard. I wanted to mention color. And the reason that I specifically chose blue and orange instead of the more traditional profit and cost red and green. And part of that is that a large portion of our population is red-green colorblind. And so it's hard to see the difference if you see like between total sales and total ad spending, if they were in red and green for spend and sales respectively. And so the blue and orange provides contrast in an accessible way. So I just wanted to mention in the design of data visualizations, the conversation around accessibility of those visualizations is more and more, or is happening more and more. And I've been excited to get involved in that sort of exploration.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're just showing that you're curious and you're also being empathetic and accommodating. That's fantastic. I'm glad that you kind of riffed on that point. All right, Michael, any last feedback?
No, this is truly excellent. Your dashboard made it so that we don't even have to talk about the color choices because they're so accessible and it's very clear what's going on just by your tables, your charts, and more. So,
okay. All right, so we're going to cut to a quick commercial break and then have Danny come on. And what I love is that he took such a different approach to the dashboard. And I feel like that is one of the value propositions of the course is that we do a LinkedIn challenge of, hey, here's the bones of the course. I want you to customize it, post it on LinkedIn, tag me, and I'll give you feedback so that everybody has, a unique dashboard instead of this like cookie cutter. Here's the structure of this, and it's the exact same as, 3,000 other people. All right. So let's cut to Are you looking for real data to analyze? An actual problem to solve? An experience worth talking about in an interview? Well, in this case study course, you get a real-world problem with a messy data set and a business outcome that's on the line. My name is John David, and I'm the founder of Silvertone Analytics, a boutique consulting agency that focuses on business analytics. I'm also a professor of analytics at Greensboro College. And in 2021, I had the privilege of combining these two worlds. My real-world Greensboro College students got to work with my Silvertone Analytics clientele for the Analytics Minor Capstone course at Greensboro College. This case study course is modeled after the lessons, the trials, and the tribulations that my students went through in the Analytics Minor Capstone course. My students got to work directly with the president of an organization that is clearing over $150 million in revenue every year. And this case study course keeps the exact same data structures that they worked through in that case study. But I anonymized the data to protect my client's privacy. So are you ready to solve a real-world business use case, build a killer analytics portfolio, and even learn how to communicate these findings in an interview setting? Well, click the Take This Course button now and join me inside. Oh, wow. Danny is invisible now. Oh, there he is. So before we get into go ahead and share your screen. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a little bit of context on who you are? Because I know that you have a non-marketing focused background, right?
Yes, absolutely. So my background is really in healthcare, particularly clinical trials. So I've been programming in SAS for over 7 years. Strictly in clinical trials predominantly, and I've done some contracting work for government here and there.
Perfect.
So I've been trying to get into, I probably trying to get into sales and marketing. So that's how I came across this course, and I decided to, give it a try.
Yeah, I was about to say sales and marketing is my bread and butter. It's fun. Like I in my MBA, I took my supply chain classes, and it was so boring for me. Because we're like building out ad campaigns and like seeing if it resonates with different. It feels like more creative than supply chain or like something that's like more kind of rigid. So go ahead and share your screen, and we'll pull up your dashboards. We'll go back into our mock interview. I'll be the lead interviewer, and Michael will be the tech lead.
So I'll be sharing it from my Tableau Public page. That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
We don't have to do like in-stream edits. You can take those recommendations, and both of you, Tim and Danny, feel free to like tag us in it, and we can kind of iterate on the feedback.
Mm-hmm. All right. Can you see my screen?
Mm-mm.
Not yet.
So it's that share button at the you see it says mute, stop cam/mic, share.
Oh, okay.
This is a very real part of an interview, like especially these days over Zoom. This is like sometimes you have technical challenges, and this just happens to be one of them.
That's true.
Can you see it now?
Oh wait, hold on. That's actually an error on my end because it added it added a whole nother layer to the StreamYard. There we go.
There you go.
And, look how different that looks than Tim's. That's awesome. All right. So Danny, tell me what's going on with this dashboard.
So the data is from a small company that it's just trying that they do marketing on both Amazon and Facebook, and they're trying to see which of the platforms gives them a better return on investment. So trying to figure out where to spend most of their money for their marketing ads, and then another thing that I went into also was looking at attribution based on like the kind of campaigns, and just to see which of the campaigns actually led to sales, or from which campaigns they had conversions, and all that.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about what is attribution?
So attribution, I would say attribution is it's kind of like a way of determining which of the ads, or what type, like which of the, I would say ads, it could be like maybe like an email ad or Facebook ad or Instagram ad, just to see which the rate of conversion, just to see which of those ads actually led to the customer purchasing the product or the customer subscribing for a service.
Okay. So you included attribution on the dashboard as well?
Yeah, it's in a separate tab.
Okay.
This.
Oh, wow. Here, let's go to attribution. That seems. Or Michael, do you have any questions about this kind of ROI dashboard?
So a couple things. So anytime you give people the same data set, like depending how you filter and clean it, you'll have like different results, at least slightly.
Mm-hmm.
So last Tim's dashboard, I know we don't often talk about, different interviewees during a process unless it's like a competitive job thing, which you often do have multiple people interviewing for the same day for the same job, which is, depending on how you think about it, good or bad. So for this one, it seems like Facebook ROI is less than the other one. So it seems like it was calculated differently. It could be better, it could be worse. It could just be that there are certain filters that this client was more interested in, or the sub-client was more interested in for like individual contributor at, this client instead of just like the CEO. So the audience might be different here. But the one thing that's kind of interesting here is from his dashboard, it's really clear that Facebook has some sort of more direct relationship, where the other one seems, for Amazon, seems a little bit more noisy. Mm-hmm. So Facebook looks like there's some major contribution here, and that's what his visualization is showing very clearly. Like, hey, something's going on with Facebook here. Let's look into this. So
yeah, so you invest in the ads, and then like within the next week or the next month, all of a sudden you have more people buying. Yeah, and then it sounds like there's not really much of a correlation between, because I mean the spend is going up and down, and then it's the sales looks like it's not really related to that.
Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing here is the last week of March that you have here. It looks like the sales went down for both Facebook and Amazon. So I'm wondering if it wasn't a complete week of data, which probably was. Danny, was it a complete week of data in last week?
Here, I can pull up the raw data file on my end. You guys. So, Michael, tell me like about that.
That thought?
Yeah, tell me more about that.
So anytime you're cleaning data, there could be some sort of issue, because it just seems like either the end of March is like a really bad time to invest or buy something, or just the sales just dip. It could be, less product available. Could be that the sales for a given date aren't captured till later, which sometimes happens. But it's just something to look into. Like, it could be anything. Could be just natural part of the data, could be something weird in the dashboard, but I think it's probably more of a data artifact than anything else. But yeah.
Let's say that let's say that it's stopped in the middle of the week. What would you do in that situation? Actually, let me ask Danny. Danny,
yeah,
I'm like asking you, like, Danny. Okay, so let's say that the data ends on a Tuesday. Would you or would you not include that week within the analysis, or how would you handle that?
So, I mean, I'm thinking, I don't know if there's a situation where data scaffolding can be applied so you can have it for the entire month.
Well, it wouldn't be a data scaffolding is just combining multiple. So let's say that it's a limitation within the data. And here, actually, I can share my screen and pull up here. I'm going to bump your screen for a second just to pull up mine.
I mean, he could be right about combining data sets. It could be just that you do have some future data in April that you have to migrate to March just because of the way that data was inputted.
That's crazy. Okay, so let's see, 330. Yeah. So in this situation, the sales for, and this is specifically Okay, let's look at Facebook. So the sales go all the way. Yeah. So it was just a down month. So that wasn't a situation where it got cut off in the middle. It's just, that's an interesting point.
Mm-hmm. So Dane's dashboard was epic then.
Yeah. So it did everything it needed to. Let's pull it back in.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Sorry, I was off in Excel land, like trying to get everything pulled up. What you said you uncovered some seasonality?
It looks like Danny, do you want to talk about their seasonality here? If in theory, like some month is better than other months and stuff.
Yes, actually. So I put a filter here just to see, in case the client wanted to look at it on month by month basis. And so here you can just see, January versus February and March as well. But, it looks like Facebook did really well in based on the ROI for Facebook in the month of January. That was, pretty good. And yeah, so I guess just try to talk to them and try to figure out what is it they did in the month of January that, the returns were so good, and probably they should keep doing the same thing.
All right, we're breaking the fourth wall again here, but Jay Sueno is in the chat. Jay, we were just talking about you. If you go and listen to 30 minutes ago, we were talking about how I connected you with Nicholas, and we're going to start doing some analytics for the nonprofit sector. So thanks for coming on. That's awesome. All right, back into interview. I'm now the interviewer again, not the live streamer. Okay. So I do really like the formatting for this dashboard. It looks really. I mean, Michael, what do you think? I mean, it almost looks like a web app or something. Like
this is pretty epic. It breaks the Tableau mold and does something even more. I really like how Danny has it so Danny that you have it. It's like January, February, March, because it clearly shows there's something going on here. Maybe we don't have enough data yet to see it long term, but it's clear that if you're doing this for a client, it would be like, oh, this is fantastic. Like we can see what's going on and potentially why, or at least something to look at for the next year. Also, awesome dual axes. You don't see that often. At least I don't anymore. Where you can directly look at the spend versus sales. So it's very, very much interesting here.
Yeah, I mean, the UI, this looks like a web page. Like that could be embedded on my website, and I would feel comfortable having. Well, I guess if this were, I wouldn't want my private information. Although, actually, Michael, I think we're going to start just opening up our data sources of hey, if you want to study our data, have at it. We'll get your email address though. It will cost you your email. But no, this, Dan, you have got an eye for design. I mean, this looks. I like the shadowing on the boxes, and the KPI cards are all. I mean, fantastic job. That looks so good. I hope you're proud that you have this as a portfolio piece.
Oh, I am, absolutely.
All right, so let's jump over to attribution.
So the attribution part of it, I was trying to go for the same thing. Okay, so I kind of did a distribution to see based on the different types of the attribution for Facebook, and try to compare it to see I guess which sorry, okay,
so, I was going to say it's broken.
Yeah, so just wanted to see an overview of Facebook versus Amazon, just to see how a lot of attribution, just to see what it's working. So you can see here that from the, I guess, 91 orders on Facebook, 46 of them came from FA1, while just kind of the percentage breakdown, and you can see a similar thing here happening for Amazon as well.
Wait, can I pause you right fast, Daniel?
Sure.
You're falling into the trap that I just laid out about talking about Tim. you're jumping into the hyper specifics first. Back out. Tell us what is going on here. Like, think about it like you're swimming in the kiddie pool, or this is like kindergarten math. Like, what? Like, explain it to me. Like, I'm a layperson. I have no idea what's going on here. So start there first. Then we can get hyper specific once I understand the context.
Okay. So what is happening here is they have these ads that they run, and the ads are the campaigns. And so based on these ads or campaigns, they want to know which of them lead to, I guess, a conversion. So
what is the best ad that happened in Q1 of that year?
For Facebook, I would say the best ad will be FA1.
Okay. What about for Amazon?
For Amazon, the best ad will be A2.
Okay. And tell me, how are you getting that?
So I looked at the ad spend per ad, and then try to compare, and I compared it with sales from that same ad.
Okay. Michael, do you have any questions about this dashboard?
Okay. So I'm going to be a little nitpicky here. So,
Sure.
So just from like, if I were to share this with like a non-technical boss, because they're the ones that control like what we end up doing. So the null here is a little distracting. I know it seems like really small. So null is unknown, I'm guessing here.
Yeah. So null is there was no I guess attribution associated with it. That's what the null is. No ad,
Okay.
no specific ad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a preference, but I probably put like unknown or like, or, you know, miscellaneous or, you know, something. But that's just a comment here. I like this a lot. I like the other page better, honestly, just because I think pie charts this is more of an opinion of an interviewer, but universe sometimes are very like opinionated, like, oh, pie charts are terrible or whatever. But I like the line graph a little better because it's clearer. Because I found the colors were a lot easier to read, whereas in this one, the colors, I think from looking at the Facebook to Amazon, it's hard to see like there's some sort of connection. Whereas your last graph was like very clear, like this is over the same time period, and you know those sort of things. But this is a harder thing to graph. This is a harder thing to visualize. It's important to mention that.
Also, too, this is interesting. So we had Ash, who was a former LinkedIn data scientist, who like we were talking about this case study course, and he was like, "Oh yeah, the attribution isn't there." And then we had a 30-minute conversation about how attribution works. I just clipped that live stream segment, added in the course, then added into the data source. So Danny hasn't had as much time with this. Like that's a recent addition to the course.
Oh, I see.
So this is really just his first iteration, which Danny, by the way, for your first iteration, this looks fantastic. So what we're typically doing is like, they'll post it, tag me in it. I'll give them 3 points of feedback. So that first one got, I think, like 1 or 2 rounds of revision. So that's also something I kind of wanted to highlight to everyone listening, is that this isn't a one and done thing. Like you need to take an iterative approach to building these out. So like this is essentially the prototype. And we're the, like in this situation, I guess now we're wearing different hats of like, we're going to tell you, all right, the pie chart isn't good because, well, I mean, from a data visualization, Tim got into color theory. I'm going to geek out on like the way our eyes work. We are not good at understanding, okay, is this angle bigger than this angle and by how much? But we can see that, okay, this bar is that much longer than this bar. Like we especially if it's a unified axis. So Michael, how could he improve this specific visualization? Do you think a bar chart or maybe a tile chart?
Well, I mean, just going back, I mean, just by looking at his first page of his Tableau Public, someone would hire him anyway, so it's kind of pointless. Just because that first graphic was so awesome.
Well, there you go, Danny. You've already won.
So the attribution stuff's more just like for specific marketers to look in, I'm guessing. So I don't know if like not everyone will look into it. So this is probably fine as is. It's also like a first iteration, right? So I think maybe maybe a bar chart here. It's harder because they're not exactly the same thing, because the attribution, FA1 is not the same as, there's no equivalent for A1 for Amazon. So this is a tricky visualization, right? So yeah, bar charts probably are going to be better because you can see the difference in the bar, as Deepak said in the chat. Hopefully I said that correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't.
Well, okay, so Deepak has taken all 3 of our courses, and he's just knocked them out of the park. Also, he just landed his Tableau developer job. So I wanted on air to bring him on and say, congratulations, you won. You got your Tableau job. Also, we need to have you on. I thought, Deepak, I thought that it would be like 1 a.m. your time. So I didn't think that you could make the live streams. But we totally could have had you on. But, okay. So he's saying bar chart. Do you think that... sorry,
Danny, what do you think? Yeah, so Danny, what do you think about this? Like the choice of visual, at least.
I honestly think a bar chart, could have been better. From a visual standpoint, so you can get to see the bars.
You know what I just realized, and this is kind of a sophisticated approach, but you could have a stacked bar chart that has a relationship to sales and ad spend kind of baked into it. So like it could be various different sizes, and then you could say, all right, this is how much was spent, this is how much was made. That's kind of hard for me to visually show, or visually tell. I'd have to show kind of the idea there. But I think incorporating the ad spend and the sales within one bar would be interesting.
But honestly, though, the other thing to consider, John David, here is the metrics above it might be all we actually really need in the first place. So like Danny probably just, knocked out of the park just with, FA1, FA2 saying like, oh, FA1's a lot better. And then like for Amazon being like, oh, AA2 and AA3 is like, oh, it's so much better. So that could also be something to consider here, is like, do you need to have the visual at all for like the stuff at the bottom? But it's just an opinion. I just could be wrong, completely wrong. So
it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
Okay, well, who knows?
I bring you on for your expert opinion, and then I just reject it. Get it out.
That's fine. I mean, this is conversation, right? So like,
no, I'm just messing with you.
Like Danny had like an amazing like first page, and then the second page is like the first iteration, right? So we always update and iterate and improve ourselves. So it's a very nice chart here. I'm just trying to see like what could be improved, but maybe a bar chart. But again, an interviewer has an opinion. Sometimes it could be wrong too. So the other thing is, like, even in interviews itself, especially these days over Zoom, if you have like a Tableau, just a Tableau open without public, you can be like, oh yeah, so here's the data, here's what I have, and the person's like, oh, you should use a bar chart, and then Danny whips it out and it's like, oh yeah, like this bar chart actually looks terrible, So that's a good place to also like insert skill in a very nice way that a lot of people can take advantage of these days versus 5 years ago you couldn't do that interview. So just talk to people.
Yeah, I think probably just a simple bar chart of well, okay. This is getting like kind of, because I see downsides. I see downsides for both, and I want you to I want to get your opinion so we can have like a nuanced conversation about it. What you think?
Me, I would say I'll put the sales in the bar chart.
Okay. Ooh, you know what you could do? You could do sales and dollar amount, like the different links, and then you could have as a tooltip, or like what's showing up is the percentage of return on investment as like just a hard number, like within the label there. Because and see, this is like not cut and dry. This is very. I mean, what I love about this is like, okay, this is a real use case. It's messy data, like so here I can share my screen. So here's the data set. you can see that we've got, so for the attribution F1 on the 5th row here, there's nothing. Then we have social, which Danny, that might be another interesting kind of secondary analysis, is like, what's the relationship of social sales versus ad sales?
Okay.
So, well, I mean, now we're starting to get totally into the weeds, but you did a fantastic job. I mean, even though the attribution analysis was a lot more rough, I mean, it already looks great. Like, you've already got the brand on it. And somebody was saying, like, we need like a cheat sheet of how you go about branding your dashboards, because it looks fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the feedback. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, and seriously, the first page is like, it's epic. It's super clear, like what's happening, why it's happening, and then oftentimes you get the point of sale or return on the client's investment just by showing that one page. And the other stuff is more like, oh yeah, like this is great, and then so they may not even ask you for the second page because the first page is like, wow. So
true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna cut to our second and last commercial break, and then we're gonna pull everybody into the chat, and we're gonna have open Q&A. So those of you who are listening to live stream right now, start asking your questions. Please ask your questions so that I don't have to scroll all the way up to find the next question, because I think we've had like 300 messages sent on the chat. So please ask your questions right now. In this case study course, you're going to learn 3 things. Number 1, you're going to improve your business acumen. This means that you're going to learn about how business works. Then we're going to move into the second point, which is analytics hard skills. So once we understand how the business works, we're then going to use some business intelligence tools, specifically Tableau, to solve the business problem and uncover insights. And then the third point, which is very, very important, are the soft skills. And the whole last chapter is dedicated to how you can more effectively explain your findings and also talk about past projects in an interview setting. To be a little bit more specific, you're going to be calculating the return on investment of 2 different marketing channels. So we're going to be looking at our Amazon and our Facebook ad spend. And there are 3 different data sources. So our first data source is our cost data source. And this is where we can see all of the ad spend, and it's in one data source. Then there is a sales data source for Facebook and a sales data source for Amazon. The challenge is that we're going to have to combine all 3 of these data sources together and then isolate our spending data and associate it with the relevant sales data source. By the end of the project, you're going to figure out which of these has the highest return on investment. But you're also going to have a challenge where you're going to visualize the data and see if there are any insightful trends that you could communicate to our end client. So if you're up for a challenge, then sign up and let's get started. All right, nobody asked a question during that commercial break.
It's all right. It's all right.
All right.
I have 2 questions prepared.
Okay, well, so I had to go all the way up because I was like, no one listens to me. They ask questions like off the cuff, and I'm like, please ask me a question. They just don't listen. But okay, so let's see. We've got, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm going to butcher this. Juan and Lee. Do you guys even need an MBA to get a job in the analytics space? Or I guess let's pivot that question slightly. Should you get a master's degree? I'm kind of curious your perspective on it, Michael.
Oh, so I mean, everyone's biased, right? So I mean, I teach at universities, but I think back in the day you did, like, absolutely, because degrees are the most important thing, at least back in the day. But I think now it's not so much a requirement, it's the skills that you have. So if Tim and Danny have portfolios, like, that's matters a lot more oftentimes, because people reach out to you because like, oh, I really like something I saw online that you did. So I think less so now. There are exceptions where like a degree is like an absolute mandatory thing, but I think that's less and less now and few and far between. So what do you guys think?
It's funny because I'm on 2 college boards now, and I feel like this is a kind of an edgy take, but I think a lot of colleges are very far divorced from the actual real world. Some of them are like 20 years behind, and it will shoot you in the foot as opposed to launch you forward. All right, who doesn't have it? Someone doesn't have their headphones in. I'm hearing like echo. You guys hear that? It's not just me, right?
Very faintly.
I'm very faint. It might just be a little bit. Wait, as long as I have a mic, can I speak to the MBA question?
No, we're gonna mute you. I'm just kidding. I'm muting him. Anyone else? Anyone?
I'll go ahead and give an unequivocal no real quick. I had a bachelor's degree and was working on my master's in public affairs when I got my first analytics job. But before that, the way that I got into analytics was by following my curiosity. And so when you start using data to answer real world questions or questions about the business that you're focused in, questions about the nonprofit that you volunteer for, and if you're a curious person who likes to figure out answers to challenging problems, you'll really quickly start to build the skills and build the conversational fluency, if you will, to talk about data and talk about analytics. And there's so much out there to help you learn on the internet. I think an MBA is actually irrelevant for analytics professionals. That's an edgy take.
Well, okay. I think that, analytics is a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, you have the Michael Galarnyks of the world, like the power coders, super technical people. I say this analogy a lot. It's like I have my floaties on in terms of like analytics hard skills. I'm essentially a strategist entrepreneur who has a little bit of analytics sprinkled on top. So I think that getting an MBA for me was valuable because I get to see kind of it's a high level view, but of just about all the facets of business. Also too, this is what is frustrating about academia. Now that I have an MBA, I can teach to where, like, for example, Ryan Forrest, who is probably the best marketing analytics expert that I know, he can't teach because he only has an undergrad degree. So I guess it depends on like where you want to go within your career. But yeah, we have this conversation all the time. I
say it's an edge case. I think it's an edge case, the teaching thing, because you make a lot. I mean, you make a lot more not teaching. Like you're in some senses more so volunteering your time teaching than anything, because you make a lot more consulting. So at least you should.
So let me push back. I think if you want to work for a Fortune 500 company, they get so many applicants that they use the do you have a master's or do you not as a lever to weed out a lot of people.
Depends on company, but yeah, sure.
Well, just like when I was looking at the big, like, because I thought that I wanted to get a job like a 9 to 5. And I think a lot of the companies that I was looking at was like, you had to, well, I guess that's also HR jargon, which is a whole nother conversation of, was it coming from the actual hiring manager or is this just a template that was stamped on it from HR? But okay, Hunter, you had some questions that you saved.
Yeah, I had one from, let me pull that up real quick.
It looks like Kinga, I see you guys talking in the chat.
Yeah, so Kinga had a question. She said, in a real-life analytics position, are you taking an iterative approach to dashboards? Who is your sounding board and your manager? And then typically, how many versions of a project does somebody make?
Michael, you got any thoughts on that?
So I mostly program these days. I mean, I look at dashboards, so I see more so the final result. But any sort of work in a big company it's going to be iterative. It's not just like, oh yeah, here's this final product. I just made it last night, and this is the final thing. Unless it's like a really high priority to like get something out the door. So I think it's more iterative than people think. What do you guys think?
Okay, I have thoughts on this. Let me tell a very quick narrative story. So when I first started my consulting agency, it took me a lot of iterations to get what the clients wanted. But then once I had like, I don't know, 10, 15 projects under my belt, I started to develop mental models of like, okay, here's how CMOs think about their marketing dashboards. Here's how CFOs want to look at their financials. And then it's like, once at the beginning, you have to do a lot of iterations, but once you kind of get the correct kind of like mental models built out, it becomes a lot easier. So you start, instead of starting from ground zero and having like, I have no idea what they want, I'm going to push this out and then get a bunch of feedback and then iterate multiple times. You could actually start to lead the conversation and say, here's typically the best practice of looking at X KPIs or X data points. And that, I mean, that's kind of a nuanced conversation of going from entry level and being the person who gets dictated to becoming like a well-known expert and kind of thought leader in the space. Cause then you flip roles within the conversation. Do you agree, Michael?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, definitely at the beginning, like you're iterating everything, especially if it's a new client or a new boss where everything you're doing before is wrong. And then you have to get to what they're looking for. And then from there, it's more so either the client trusts you or you kind of know what certain people want in certain kind of types of companies. And there's less iteration. I do think there's still some iteration. There is, because there's going to be variances among CMOs versus CFOs. And I specifically point to that example because there are fundamentally different types of people. If you've kind of ascended the hierarchy of a marketing department, you're probably much more creative than someone who is a CFO and financially driven. So with the marketing analytics dashboards I create, it's much more visual to where a lot of these CFOs just want like tables. And that's how they've spent 25, 30 years looking at Excel documents. So basically you create like an infrastructure within Tableau that's similar to that. And I feel like if any of the Tableau people are watching, they're like, don't do that. You're butchering Tableau. But at the same time, it's got to be pitted on what the client or the manager or whoever the end user wants and is comfortable with. Hunter, you had another question?
Yeah. Well, before I get to this other question, it seems like there's a couple of people in the chat who are asking the age-old question of Tableau versus Power BI. So if we could just bounce that around again real quick, I think that'd be pretty good.
So
Python.
Yeah, Al, you haven't talked very much. What are your thoughts?
No, I've just been talking to the chat. I've not done anything with Power BI, just what we did with a couple of weeks ago and playing with it for 5-10 minutes. I feel like Tableau is more intuitive. It's a bit more user-friendly. Yeah, but that's just kind of gut feeling from watching you guys kind of play with it. I was like, just watching some of the struggles, like, this feels like it would be easier in Tableau to me. Yeah.
I agree to that sentiment. I feel much more comfortable on Tableau, but I did learn data visualization on Tableau. What's interesting is, I don't know, 2 or 3 live streams ago, we had Jenny on, and we did like an hour deep dive into Hunter's Power BI workbook while he wasn't there and was struggling. He called in from Dairy Queen.
You really threw under the bus there.
No. We were critiquing his work, and he was on vacation, so he couldn't defend his work. And he was like, he called me after the live stream, fuming mad. Like I had thoughts, I had defenses.
Well, that means the viz was inadequate, right? 5-second rule. It shouldn't need you there to explain it. If it was effective, it would stand on its own.
Wow.
Well, I'm going to push back on that because you need to set up that high-level conversation of what's going on first. But yes and no, give and take. Michael, you were going to say something?
So my thought is this. So for Tim and Danny, I think knowing about that question, so like a client asks you like, oh yeah, so like, what are your thoughts on, Power BI versus Tableau? Have an answer ready for that sort of stuff. Because it's probably a question you might get on like, oh, what are the limitations of using Tableau that you don't have when you use Power BI and vice versa? Because, if you work for a certain client, For Power BI, like it integrates better with Microsoft technologies. Like just in general, it's my opinion, but I mean, it's probably pretty clear because it's coming from Microsoft, right? That's a big opinion because I know also Power BI integrates better, at least in my opinion, with Python. And I'm a Python person, and I hear it from my Microsoft friends that, you know, they use Power BI Microsoft because it integrates better because they have a stake in it. So
I think that's an excellent piece of advice. Don't have like a cookie cutter. I mean, I guess my response when people ask me that question is that I think Tableau is a data visualization platform that has data modeling tacked onto it, and I think Power BI is the opposite. I am more of a data visualization person than I am a data modeler, so I think that's why I like Tableau more. But yeah, make it personal to you. I mean, I think that's a fantastic way of responding. All right, so this one's a good one for you, Michael. Where can we get public data sets for practice?
So I know this is a data analytics podcast, but there's a website called Kaggle. I'm sure you've gotten data from it. There's a lot of publicly interesting data sets on there. There's a lot of government websites for data sets. So you can go through a lot of government data. Government data I find is sometimes a bit too aggregated. But I love Kaggle because it's messy sometimes. It can be a bit ugly. If you're really, really ambitious and you want to learn a whole other skill set entirely and you just have a lot of free time for some strange reason, you can also web scrape and get data if you want to be pseudo legal, I'm
so glad that you mentioned that because I literally went to the pool yesterday with Molly Welsh, who we helped her get her first data science job on the podcast. And she was saying that she has looked at multiple courses for web scraping and she has lucked out. How did you learn web scraping?
It's unfortunate, really. So I have scraped, to say this in a nice, legally okay way, I have scraped some websites to do projects and to help people publish papers on data that's related to websites, including potentially GoFundMe and like those sort of giving websites, so that they don't really have a publicly accessible API necessarily. Maybe they do now. But to look at like, which campaigns are successful for getting people, healthcare, or which campaigns are successful for, getting someone, like a house or whatever, So I learned that, and I learned it through Scrapy, which is the Python library. But Scraping Hub has like tools available where you can, do minimal amounts of code to, web scrape. But there's a lot of other tools out there. I just do it from scratch in Python because it's easier for me. But.
Okay. Well,
I just had a follow-up question for Michael. So I know you mentioned Scrapy because I've been trying to get into web scraping recently, and I see Scrapy, I see Selenium, and a bunch of others. Selenium versus Scrapy, and which one is better, and why?
So people often use stuff together. So it's been a long time since I've scraped because it's not really my job anymore. So Scrapy is really great for you see something on a website, you want the data because it's there and you think it should be yours, or at least because they don't have a structured API. So just for going back, a lot of websites have structured APIs to get data because otherwise people would just take it. So like Twitter has an API where you can just kind of, take it in a nice ordered fashion. Of course, they rate limit you. Of course, it's web scraping. With Scrapy, there's important considerations to keep in mind that people often don't. So sometimes with web scraping, people automatically scrape the pages too fast, and it causes some issues on the websites. So people don't like that. For Selenium, I haven't used Selenium in a long time, but oftentimes you need to have a computer automate clicks. And so I think Selenium is better for that. So like you want to get some text underneath something that isn't showing all the way, or you want to go to another page or whatever. Selenium helps with that. But I should take this offline because it's been a while since I've compared tools. But yeah, I would start with Scrapy, and if you find it's not enough, then integrate Selenium with it, because like most of these tools can be used together. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If I could provide the average dummy that knows nothing about coding and such things, perspective. So I think that there are topics that you can kind of get into on the cheap, if you will. You can pick up enough to do like basic SQL queries without devoting like big chunks of time to learning SQL or to doing like a whole class. And you can kind of just do a $10 Udemy or a LinkedIn Learning and sort of pick up enough to get into a project. I tried to do that with web scraping, and I don't get the sense that that is a topic that you can sort of get a surface level exposure to. I gave up on it pretty quick because I had other stuff to do. But it definitely struck me as something. It's like, hey, if you want to start doing projects that involve web scraping, you're going to need to devote time to that. You can't get a surface level. You got to kind of dive in and immerse yourself in it to make it useful.
Yeah,
Michael, I'd love to hear if that's.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely a big ask. It's also a lot of pages have defenses against web scraping, and also depending on where you are, it might not be legal depending on the site. So it's really something you have to dive kind of headfirst into. There are tools these days and companies that provide those services, or at least make a UI that makes it easier, rather than just learning Python and learning about web scraping, and then you're using Selenium, which I typically use it for just for like clicking on buttons and getting the next page and stuff like that.
Yeah, to that, LinkedIn will suspend your account real quick if they even get a whiff of web scraping. Real quick.
Yeah. That's oddly Pacific.
Yeah, sounds odd.
No, I didn't even try to scrape LinkedIn. They
sounds
thought
oddly
I did,
incriminating.
and and suspended my account actually multiple times. And I had to get into it with them like, I have no freaking clue how to do this. Trust me, I've never attempted it. So I don't know what set it off, but yeah, it happened to me several times.
Okay, so this is a really interesting question coming from Natika here. And Natika, I want more context on this. So if you're still in the live chat, will you tell me what area of business acumen you want to learn more about? If it's sales, marketing, supply chain, I might have some specific advice if you can reply back by the time we're still talking about this. So when I was hanging out with Molly yesterday, she actually has the flip side of this where, okay, I'll just read Natika's question and then we'll kind of have a conversation around this. So I've just started working as a business analyst and I have almost no business knowledge. I'm learning slowly and my seniors are really patient and helpful, but this is affecting my work deadlines and quality. How can I fast forward the process and what can be the catalyst? I love this question because me and Molly just had a conversation yesterday about she got a data science job before she knew how to use Python and is in the same position, only having to learn APIs and web scraping and all this stuff on the job. So it's a stressful position to find yourself in. I mean, why you're laughing?
I know. I'm more sympathizing.
Okay, so I'll let you answer the Python thing, and then I can point her in the right direction if she responds back with some more specifics. So how to learn coding on the job? Go.
So the key for anything is there's always be things on the job you just don't know. And any sort of job, there's always going to be a ramp up period where you're probably working more than you do later on in the job because people don't, accept ramp up periods as much as they used to. Just my experience where it's like, oh, you got to start, really quick and, move really fast and all that sort of stuff. So you're spending time learning, sometimes even outside of work hours, which can be very stressful in a lot of ways. So the biggest thing is the ability to find resources to learn things, I think is the biggest one. And a lot of places, at least internal documents, don't always have that if you're on the job. So like learning, the specific library for a specific company in Python or whatever, that could be a big ask. But I think the biggest thing to do is to improve your general knowledge so that when people tell you something, you can actually build on that knowledge. That's the biggest, hardest one. And I really recommend when you first start a job, don't have as much of a life as you normally do until you get kind of on track. And then eventually you get back your life, So you just spend a lot more time working and then eventually you just go back to normal times. So terrible advice, terrible American advice. So just work a lot more, but yeah.
Yeah, it'll be worth the pain eventually one day, maybe. No, I think that, well, it was a decision. You took on the decision to get the job that's going to push you. And because I'm kind of coming out of a period of my life where I built my consulting agency while I was learning my skill set at the same time. And it was, I mean, a good 3 years where I was just stressed out continuously. That being said, I am now on the other side of that, and I'm established as an expert in like a very quick, rapid period of time. There are upsides and downsides of that. Like, yeah, you may lose your sanity for a little while and not get as much sleep. And do you have any specific like advice on where she could get some like great foundational knowledge? Because learning Python is like learning a new language, right?
Yeah, so I think Corey Schaefer on YouTube has probably the best like introduction to Python videos.
Okay.
As someone that also does YouTube videos occasionally, very occasionally, I think Corey Schaefer is probably the best in terms of just like learning basics Python, and then from there, branch out and learning the data specific libraries, because I think people just try to start off, all of a sudden, like they get into Python and even on analytics, they go, oh, I'll start off with machine learning or deep learning. And I'm like, whoa, start off, with the basic knowledge so you can actually build on it, understand what's going on. So that way, when someone tells you something like, oh, change this or do this, you understand the lingo, because learning the lingo is kind of very challenging. I think learning the libraries in Python is easier. So like doing data manipulation in Python is easier than learning the basics of Python, which you should learn first. Okay.
Well, awesome. And Molly's still in the chat. So
yeah.
Wow, you've been tuning in for an hour and a half. That's awesome, Molly. So the advice I gave her yesterday. So we went and hung out in the pool and then went to dinner. And over dinner we were talking about how so this is I'm looping back Natika's question about the business acumen. So I think that it's important for you to get plugged into in-person human groups. So for example, I went to, actually this is where I ran into Tim again. So we ran into each other at a Synergy event, which is like a young professionals group. And then we ran into each other at a Code for Greensboro meetup. So which you told me about. At that meetup, I ran into this guy, Hunter Loftus, who it's funny because it was like one of his last days at Facebook. Turns out this guy works for Facebook, is a block away from me. We're neighbors. And we had him over for dinner like that next week. And we were just hanging out over dinner with a group, like a small group of people. He had a breakdown. He explained how the machine learning algorithms work, or like the machine, how I should build my marketing strategy for the platform just over dinner, and how the machine learning can apply to kind of like supercharge that process. So if you can just have a person in like locally that you can connect with, and like, granted, they're not at your beck and call to like answer every single question, but like having someone that you have a personal relationship and connection with can save you not only like a bunch of time, but I think also from like an emotional support perspective. Like there's someone there that cares about you, that knows the way and can kind of guide you on your hero's journey, so to speak.
Yeah, and ideally don't spend a lot of time after a couple of months. Like if your work's keeping asking you for unreasonable things, like learning languages from scratch all the time, then time to push back a little bit. Like you're not here just to work 24/7, 365. You're eventually there to live life and make a paycheck and spend time with your friends and stuff. So
clicked on that by accident. So let's get back to Natika's question. So it looks like she is working for a consulting firm. So Natika, what are you doing specifically within that? I guess I can tell you about how, so right now we're in the process of, we just push play on our ads for our learning platform. So I'm having to learn all of this from scratch. What I'm doing is I'm watching webinars on YouTube. So YouTube is a fantastic resource, but then also, like I was telling you about, running into Hunter Loftus, connecting with people who know about it. And then also, for those who are longtime listeners, I mean, Ryan Forrest is handling our ads, but he's a 10-year veteran of marketing analytics. So I think it's kind of a combination of finding online content and digesting that, but then having some type of human connection. And I don't know, Michael, is that, I've never heard
That definitely helps.
Advice.
Like going to meetups definitely helps because people give seminars and talks on basic stuff, and people are usually there to answer questions. So that's great. Classes do help, and it does take time. So I know it could be a little frustrating, but once you have that skill, it's not just good for the consulting firm you work for now. It's also good for future jobs, future clients, and those sort of things. So think of it as kind of like an investment in yourself if you have time. Because like the more skills you have, the more value you provide, and hopefully the more return on investment you get for that time. So
did you know what was your level of coding knowledge before you got your first data science job, if you don't mind me asking?
It's kind of complicated. So I'm always been a Python person, probably too framed into Python. So okay. I probably had like 6 months to a year of Python experience before I got my first job, because I was also doing a master's at the time, and like masters are good for building up. Like it's a way to it gives you time to get internships and get jobs and stuff, so that really does help. So I kind of use internships as kind of a way to build my experience to get that job. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the other thing to note here is you probably don't need to be that great at Python. If they're asking you to learn something from scratch, like a lot of times API calls or working with libraries. So find out exactly what you need. And the process of figuring out what you need can kind of give you insights to what to learn and how to learn. Because if you try to learn everything, you're going to be crushed. So if you try to learn like, I'm learning basic Python, and I'm learning object-oriented Python and decorators and Dunder methods and all that sort of stuff. Well, maybe you don't need to actually know all that stuff. Maybe you just need to know lists and tuples and for loops and print statements and, working with a data manipulation library. Maybe that's all you need. You don't need to learn the other stuff. So find out what you need and then zero in on that stuff. And then if you're not sure what you need yet, just learn the basics. And then once you learn the basics, you probably have a better idea what else to learn.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like you have a thread you pull on and like the things start kind of splintering out from that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so another question that kind of came up during that hangout session yesterday was, from like an anxiety standpoint, from like a mental, like how can you tell when you're falling behind? Like, I think that a lot of people in those positions that Molly and Natika are, like, they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves. And I think a lot of it is like an inner game of like, I'm like Natika said in her comment, I'm slowing down. How can I fast forward this? I mean, do you wait until they're like, you are actively like how can you read that situation and kind of ease that, just check in with them? Like, how would you socially navigate that? So
I would ask like, hey, like, you have any good resources for this? Or like, what should I learn? Because oftentimes they're like, oh yeah, you only need to know, a very small subset of things. So just ask. We're often afraid to ask our coworkers, like, for help or like, how should I do something? So I would ask because I know it's a little bit scary maybe, but ask and it'll be useful. I think the other thing to think about is everyone feels these kind of stresses and pressures in like a workplace because there's always something that you don't know. So just ask, go from there, and you'll be okay. Like, things always seem like the end of the world, but really they're not. And you'll actually speed up if you just ask a question, really.
Yeah, and I think that it's also what happens in those situations is that you start having these like, it's paranoia and imposter syndrome sneaking in of like, oh, I'm going to lose this job. And maybe that is not the expectation. Like, they don't expect you to know all this stuff. And you're putting undue pressure, like you're suffering essentially unnecessarily so. So I think that it's being proactive about having communication, because I think a lot of managers, unfortunately, do not kind of take stock of that. Mm-hmm. So, Natika, I hope you're not stressing out too much. But Tim, I saw your private chat. Feel free to hop off anytime. But
Thanks,
you want to plug Code for Greensboro before you head out?
Yeah, and I posted it on the on the public comments there check us out at Code for GSO on Twitter, especially if you're local to the Triad area. We're looking towards some exciting things this fall, despite the COVID hiccup, and projects with open data, projects with building civic apps, and working with community organizations. So I'll see you online.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks for you're a trooper today.
Take care,
See
everyone.
Hi.
Awesome.
And Bender rapport.
Yeah, no, we're dropping like flies. Michael, how you doing on time? You gotta head soon.
I'm good. I'm probably have another half an hour at most, but yeah.
Okay. Hunter, did you see any other questions coming up?
I have. So this was just a short question. It was Rishi was asking for predictive analysis. What's normally a good time frame for that? So I'm assuming what he means by that is like, at what point in time is it okay to start doing predictive analysis? Like the time, like in the data, I guess. I don't know if that was what he was asking, but
I think I can answer this. I think the biggest answer to that is it depends. And that's a terrible answer in a lot of ways, but
That's like the go-to answer.
it depends on your client or what project you're working on. And even if predictive analysis is even necessary. So sometimes a visualization is all you need. So like for Danny's dashboard, like that first page was like perfect. Like this, let's go, this is great. And that's like all we need. I mean, a lot of cases at least. And so if you find that you need to actually, predict some trends, or you need to predict some sort of future outcome or some price for a home or whatever, well, then you have to do predictions because that's your exact task. So.
all right. Thank you for that.
One final thing about the prediction stuff. Sorry, I forgot to mention this. So it depends on the prediction you're also making. So oftentimes a simple model is usually the best. So people, these days go to neural networks for predictions and stuff. In reality, oftentimes they just need like a really simple like regression, or they need a really simple like decision tree or whatever, random forest or whatever, instead of, something crazy. Yeah.
All right.
And can I just say, despite all the trash talk I got from everybody on my hairstyle, Katika over here quite enjoys it. So, suck on that.
Well, I hope you're not planning on wearing that to an interview anytime soon. You know what you look like? You look like someone in a punk band from the mid 2000s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's cracking me up. Okay, well this was awesome. I feel like we don't have to go all 30 minutes. What are you doing right now with AnyScale? So you're doing the developer relations, right?
So my job is kind of interesting in a lot of ways. So I develop content, so like programming content, like how to learn distributed computing, or I evangelize the RAPE project, which is like a distributed computing framework that makes it really easy to scale from a single computer to like thousands upon thousands of computers. Because a lot of computers these days, a lot of algorithms like for machine learning, doing them, like training them on a single computer is not tenable. It's just not possible. It just takes too long. Like a lot of the cutting edge stuff you see these days is trained across thousands upon thousands of nodes, so i.e. computers. And so I write about that. I code a little bit, contribute some documentation to the project. And that's a lot of my job. I also market. So I'm like, we had a conference this past June, and Race Summit, 2021, talks on YouTube, like stuff like that too. But it's very enjoyable. I also still teach at Stanford's adult education program, continuing studies. And I also do LinkedIn learning classes and some other stuff occasionally too.
Jack of all trades.
Yeah,
that's true. I saw your how to get a remote data science job.
Yeah, that was, so you're making a similar course, I'm guessing.
Mine's very different. It's called How to Land a Business Intelligence Role.
Completely different. That's true. Yeah. No, I mean, mine was mostly like learn programming, and then yours is probably like here's dashboard advice and how to sell yourself and stuff. Yeah, which is different. Yeah.
Well, okay. I think the thing that I'm like, the new cross that I'm like, or the new thing I'm pushing out is personal branding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone's talking about that, or people are kind of talking about it, but everyone thinks, or like I guess the usual gut impulse is that, oh, I'm just going to build my hard skills really in depth, and that's going to be what's going to get me the job. And I think that is, I don't know why that's so common, but I get that all the time. It's like, what tool should I learn? What tool should I learn? What coding language? Like, it's instead of like, well, what do you want to do? How well do you know any like space within the business? There seems to be kind of a disconnect there. And that's, I mean, what we're doing with building out these portfolios is, well, number one, it's like you're doing good work that has an impact, but number two, you're broadcasting that out. Because Hunter, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but you are having people reach out to you for job interviews, right?
Yeah, I've had a few people over the past couple of months that I've been on the channel, been on the podcast, and I mean, what can I say? What can I say? You follow the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast, you get a job. I mean, it's simple as that.
Yeah. Well, Hunter, you know what? They're trying to steal you because you're so good at plugging things. But no, I mean, like you had like a legit, like pretty large organization reach out to you about wanting you to interview for their internship, right?
Yeah, actually, it was interesting enough. You'd never think about it, but Sherwin-Williams, like the paint company, actually reached out to me about an analytics job. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I told them that I want to develop a little bit further, and I said just stay in touch, and they were fine with that. So I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's just about how well you market yourself. You put your work out there. They see. I mean, recruiters see the work that you're doing, and they see that you're putting in the effort, and then they reach out to you for that. So I would say that like that short that we made a little while ago, it's important to have a well-rounded toolbox, and I think that's the key.
Well, you're also like really personable too. I think that's another thing that people don't think about in an interview process of like, they're trying to assess, like, do I actually want to work with this person?
Yeah.
So like being like a human and being connected is super important.
I've had to work with people who are like it's like staring at a brick wall. Like, I don't understand. You have to put yourself out there a little bit and be willing to do something bold and make it about you, because the more personal that your work is, I think the more you're going to care about it, and the better it'll be, the better quality it'll be.
Yeah. So I guess let's close out on this question, Michael. Do you have any tips on how to kind of market yourself out on the job marketplace?
I think the thing is as many sources as possible is probably pretty good, and doing as good a job as possible. So it's the Tableau Publics, having things out there is really nice because people can actually find you and come to you. Because it's a lot easier for people to come to you than you to reach out for everyone. The internet's a big place where a lot of people are on, and it's more likely that someone on the big internet's going to reach out to you than that you can scale to reach out to everyone.
Right.
And that's the way you put yourself out there. So things like Tim and Danny did by like showcasing themselves and having these excellent tools out there is more likely people are to come to them. So for me in the like data science space, like have an active GitHub, write about your analytics in some cases. Like blogging is a big thing if you do a good job. And that's how I've gotten a lot of jobs. And that's how I got my current job, ironically. So yeah.
Right. I mean, you're like the poster child here of this exact concept of like, do a good job, put out good work, and then things will come your way.
And then you'll be turning people down a lot. So it happens. Well, it's also good because if you ever get, economies go through ups and downs. So if you ever get laid off or the company goes under or, whatever, or you need a new job, it's a lot easier to switch. You're not tied to something that is not either what you want to do, not paid well enough, or if you need to move because you have family or you have, some life circumstance happen where you have to move across country, it makes it easier.
Awesome. Well, on that very important point, let's close out the live stream. This was awesome. I mean, this was like a total experiment. We haven't done this before. This is the most cooks we've had in this kitchen. So thanks everybody who tuned in on the chat. Thanks, Hunter. Thanks, Danny. And Michael, you're amazing. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.